Hey guys, it is time for the November tier list since we just had the patch on the 17th. So we're going to go ahead and start with the supports. I have the combined list at the end of this. I'm trying a new visual versus just rating them in numbers. So let's go ahead and get into it with the supports. So with supports, not a whole lot changed. You're going to have your best being Kiriko, second best being Lucio. Speed, Invul, kind of overpowered. Baptiste is still going to be your off-meta second best pick in my opinion, due to the fact that Invul super strong, not to mention Bap has actually high damage, along with other utility tools. So, with Moira, Mercy, and Ana, they're all interchangeable, but I would say that they're like mid-tier picks. I wouldn't say that they're excel at anything, but I wouldn't say they're bad at anything. I would say that Moira gets edges out Mercy and Ana purely because of the fade. I would say Mercy edges out Ana purely because of res, and Ana just gets countered by Kiriko. I really wanted to put Ana down one more tier into C, but I just couldn't do it. Ana's kit's super strong unless they have Kiriko, so she's middle of the pack. Brig is purely a brawl support. She doesn't do anything else, and for the love of God, take Zen out of support because he's just a DPS. Like, if he didn't have trance healing, he would have half the healing every other support does on this list, while barely managing the same damage that Moira and Bap can put out and Kiriko. Like, for the love of God, change Zen. He doesn't fit anymore. For the love of God, change that hero. My overall opinion on support right now is defined by, can you keep your tanks alive? If you can't keep your tanks alive, you're going to have major issues, which is why you have Kiriko, Lucio, and Bap being the strongest. Ana as a counter tool is still super strong, but if she gets countered by a Kiriko, you're just wasting a support pick because you could be doing something else with your cooldowns because your cooldowns are basically negated by Kiriko. If you combo with a Junkerqueen, maybe Ana would get more value, but I still don't put her as high as Bap. Invul Lamp, still super strong. Who would have thought supports having invulnerability would be super strong? Brig, I actually think becomes a tier in Brawl, but every other comp, she's garbage. I think that unless you're just sitting on cart, I don't think you should play her. Or if you're playing Team Brawl, then she becomes good, but otherwise don't touch her. And then the top five being Kiriko, Lucio, Bap, Moira, Mercy just makes sense. And then Ana became a tech counter pick. And then, like I said, for the love of God, just don't play Zen unless you're just playing DPS. And if that's the case, can we just get Zen changed? So now we have DPS. DPS is pretty straightforward. Reaper, Sojourn, man. Off-topic one, though, that power creeped in while she was away. I do think Mei is S tier. I think that once people realize that you can just counter the opposing tank out of the game, and you can basically get a free pick on a tank by mitigating healing, Mei's value is going to go up immensely. I think Mei Wall is arguably one of the best DPS CDs in the game. And I think people are undervaluing it, and I think that Mei One Tricks will quickly rise through the ranks now that she's back. Next, after that, it's going to be your snipers, which is Widow and Hanzo. Pretty self-explanatory why they're A tier. They're not S tier because they don't have the mobility that Sojourn does. Otherwise, all three of them would be S tier. Tracer's new range buff pushes her from B tier to A tier. I do think that Junkrat, while still underpowered, Junkrat should be S tier. Like, I have no clue why the fuck Junkrat's not S tier. Like, why has Junkrat not received a buff for the lower tiers? Like, high tier, Junkrat looks insane. And Junkrat should be insane, because his burst is ridiculous. But for some reason, he gets a nerf, which makes no sense to me. But he's still an A-tier hero. Like, his burst damage is still there. He just lacks mobility. Genji's still A-tier. He lost damage, and people are like, oh my god, it's a tactical nuke. Genji's not playable anymore. No, you just have better options that are playable. Genji's not nuked. It's stop being a doomer about it. Like, Genji's kit is still ridiculously broken at lower tiers. High tiers, he might see less value, but you're going to have other shit that's more consistent. The builders, however, have snuck in to the A tier. Torbjorn, being a baby Reaper for destroying the opponent tank, along with Symmetra, has become super strong. Targeting the tank with the DPS role, playing Reaper Torbjorn or Symmetra Reaper when you don't have a Sojourn player or a Mei player can be super valuable. I had them at the top of B tier, but I could push them up into A tier when you just counter the tank out of the game. They go down a tier when obviously the matchup doesn't let you do that, but you know, I still think that they are in between A and B tier. In B tier, we have the three other hit scans, Bastion, Cassidy, and 76. They all pretty much do the same thing. Bastion edges out Cassidy because Bastion has higher burst damage. Cassidy edges out Soldier 76 because he has more HP, and then Soldier 76 is just a worse Sojourn. Ashe, Echo, and Pharah are all still at the bottom of the list because they require a Mercy. You can't play them without it. And then I think that the Sombra hack change basically makes her unplayable to the point where she's no longer a flanker. And I think that unless they give her love in damage, she's not going to be playable now. Like, they need to up her physical damage while adjusting the stealth, because the stealth mechanic is what breaks her. Like, the hack was annoying, but it's the stealth mechanic that breaks her. Like, a perma scout that's invis forever is obviously overtuned, but if she doesn't have the damage to match up being invisible, it's like playing a DPS version of Mercy. It just doesn't fucking work. So she dropped down massively from being an S tier hero. I think that this is how the meta snipers and how everything's going to shake out for now for DPS. I really do think Mei, though. Mei and the builders, stop sleeping on them. I think they're super, super strong, and people just aren't playing them correctly yet. And Tracer's ninja buff. So now we're going to get into the tanks. Hog, Winston, it's pretty standard. Hog and Winston are the only things you can contain a Sojourn with, whether it's Hog one-shotting the other roster, or Winston using his bubble and then just primaling the Sojourn out of the fight. I do think that Sigma is sneaking up there as the best tank, because he's the only one who's a true tank left. I do think that Zarya and D.Va's nerf basically forced them below Sigma, Winston, and Hog. I do think that a full energy Zarya is an A tier hero, but I have to evaluate her at 0 energy. I would have put her in the D tier, but she's between a B and a D. At worst, she's a D. At best, she's a B. D.Va lost some of her ability to kill squishies, which pushes her down. She also doesn't have the tools needed to fight in Brawl. Rein does, and Rein has a shield, but Rein is melee. If Rein had more range, or he had some mechanic, Rein would be an A tier hero. I think that the big problem with Reinhardt is Reinhardt can't get in right now because of the Reaper, Sojourn, and Roadhog meta. I think that Rein, if he gets in, is only going to swing once or twice, and then he's going to be forced to put his shield up and try and mitigate damage. I think that the community is starting to finally catch on with Orisa. I think that Orisa is, I would say, arguably dog shit, 'cause she just doesn't have damage to back up her kit. You just ignore her. It's like a 0 energy Zarya, you just walk past them. Junkerqueen, Hammond, and Doom, I think, are all, like, the worst heroes currently in the game, along with Zen. I think the 4 of them, I would argue that Zen needs a rework. I would argue that Doom needs to be given more crowd control and not damage. We know no damage for Doom. Stop giving Doom power punch. We don't want it back. Give him more mobility. And I think that while the Sombra change did affect Hammond and Hammond got better, I still think that Hammond doesn't have the damage that needs to be Hammond. I genuinely think that as it sits right now, Hammond cannot fit in the tank category. I would actually love to see Hammond go down to either 400 or 350 HP and get moved to the DPS role. In all seriousness, I would love to see Hammond as a squishy DPS that's a slightly smaller ball. I think that would be way better for him than where he sits currently. I don't think that he fits in the tank category. And now we get into the total list. Alright, now we get into the total list. So I think that Roadhog and Winston are super strong because they're one of the only tanks that can mitigate Sojourn. I think Reaper is there purely to deal with these two tanks in the S tier, though he is super strong on his own. I think that Mei is a tech pick that will come out of nowhere and wreck people's worlds. Kiriko and Lucio is pretty standard. Sigma is going to be your best true tank, followed closely by the snipers. I think that those 3 specifically share a fate. I think that BAP is the next best support option. I think Tracer's ninja buff pushed her up. I think that Junkrat is potential S tier hero if they gave him, you know, mobility or something. He's 1 buff away from being S tier, and I really hope he does become S tier at some point. Genji, I don't think is a doomer broken. I think he's still going to be a massive issue at lower tiers. And then I think at higher tiers, if you are playing your cooldowns correctly, I think that in a team environment, Genji's nuts. The builders, I think, are stealth OP as shit. I think that they're high B tier, but easily A tier when they play in tandem with a Reaper or a Mei. I think that Zarya, D.Va, both nerfed, pushed them down a tier. I genuinely think that Bastion and them are all meh. I'm not really worried about it when I see it on the opposing team, but it's like, hey, I have to pay attention to you when you use your one cooldown. Cassidy just needs more damage. Like, I'll be blunt, he needs more damage. Moira, Mercy, and Ana are middle of the pack supports. I genuinely can't put them higher because of the shit that's above them and the meta. Rein, melee, he needs a buff. I would love to see Rein get something to make it so that he's an A tier to compete with Sigma. Soldier is just a worse version of Sojourn until they address it. Ashe and Echo require Mercy, though Echo can cheese some more than Pharah. Orisa, you just fucking ignore and walk by. Bridget's only good in Brawl. I think that Sombra, outside of her perma stealth, doesn't have the damage to back up her kit anymore. I would love for the invis to be put onto a timer and for her to get a damage buff so that she could actually be a flanker. I would also love to see Zen lose Discord Orb and gain a healing orb because he doesn't fill the support role anymore. Like, Zen is the most awkward pick for me. Like, don't get me wrong, I know that Zen can be completely and utterly nuts when you hit all your shots, but you don't heal. You don't provide any utility to your tank. You don't provide any utility to your team outside of Trance. And I would argue that you can counter Trance fairly easily with Ana and Junkerqueen. So can we just rework Zen at this point? Pharah needs to be the shackle of Mercy broken from her. She's 1 or 2 buffs away from being, you know, a B or an A tier hero, and then 1 major buff away from being an S tier hero, but she can never get there without the Mercy tether. Like, the reason that she looks good on paper is because she always has a Mercy. If you take away the Mercy, she's absolute dog. Hammond, again, I think that Hammond needs some tweak, whether it's making him squishy and moving him to the DPS role, or, like, he just doesn't do tank stuff. It's like Zen. Zen doesn't do support stuff. They feel awkward. Junkerqueen, her big cooldown got nerfed. And then, again, for the love of fucking God, do not give Doom Power Punch back. For the love of fucking God. I will take him being the Genji tank with insta-mobility across the map. Just for the love of God, don't give him one-shot damage. For the love of God, don't do it. Alright, that's going to tie up the tier list video. I will be back with the meta snapshot video in a few days, explaining the Brawl comp and the Owl meta composition. And I will see you in that video. Much love. Bye-bye.